Welcome to Taking Off with the Gary Chicago Airport Show. I'm your host, Pastor Marion Johnson. We have a very special guest here today, is Mr. Kemp, and we'll find more out about his name in a few minutes, but we thank you for tuning in. We have very exciting people at the Gary Chicago Airport, many different elements and many different spirits are there, and all of them are good spirits, and this is one of them that's helping the Gary Chicago Airport become everything that it can become. We thank you, Mr. Kemp, once again for coming.
Pleasure to be here,
sharing with us. You're a great gentleman, a great person, extremely intelligent. I like being around intelligent people. So tell us something about yourself, Mr. Kemp. He's a senior advisor for the Honorable Mayor Karen Freeman-Wilson, and does a great job. So tell us something about yourself first.
Well, I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan. I spent my high school years in Washington, D.C., and have lived in lots of different parts of the country, but have been very taken by the changes that have happened in a lot of industrial cities like a Gary and like a Detroit, and have, for about half of my career, spent time with different mayors and working in government and trying to figure solutions to help bring a lot of those industrial cities back. So Gary, like Newark, are cities that have had a phenomenal history, and we think there's a lot of opportunity to grow those cities and continue a very long-standing tradition.
How did you prepare yourself for such a career?
I've been very blessed with a family who is very focused on education. My mother and grandmother both teachers, and so education was first and foremost in my house. I went to a great high school in Washington, D.C., had an opportunity to go to Yale University for my undergraduate degree, and after that I had a chance to study abroad and to attend Harvard University for my master's in business administration.
Okay, and you put that to good work also.
I try every day to do the best I can.
Mr. Kemp, tell us about some of the projects that you've already worked on in the Gary area, and some that continue. We're sure we'll have a discussion about the airport, but we want to know some things, so some other things you've done.
I've been fortunate to spend a lot of time with great folks like yourself here in Gary.
Thank you.
There are some really interesting and important projects that are going on. Some that may not seem important but have a lot of impact to everyone, such as garbage collection. So I was part of the team that helped to develop a new garbage contract, which Waste Management now manages and does all of the residential collection and pickup for the city, while maintaining the fact that we keep employees that will help to do the yard recycling and that type of collection, but also to make sure that we set a foundation that would allow us to do work with waste-to-energy companies that may come here and be able to convert what seems to be just trash into what could become an asset that would allow us to employ Gary residents and actually generate money for the city. So that's one of the projects. I've also done a lot of work with the Railcats. I've been responsible with working with them and the stadium, which includes actually our work downtown, so both Hudson Campbell and the Genesis Center. And I've also had the opportunity to do a lot of work around our budgeting process and planning for the city going forward.
Yes, so you work with other cities like New Jersey, you work with them with that show. What is the difference working with Gary compared to other cities that you work with already?
So I served as what's called the business administrator, which is functionally like the city manager for the city of Newark, New Jersey, which is the largest city in New Jersey, under Cory Booker. Cory Booker, the mayor who's actually now running for senator of New Jersey. And in that capacity, oversaw all of the operations of the city in one form or another, along with a number of great directors. The difference is probably a little bit size, but the problems that a city like Newark has are very similar to the sorts of issues that cities like Gary have and many other industrial cities around the country. There's an issue about population density. Most of these are cities that were built to have a lot of people in small spaces. And over time, because of things that happened, they've lost a lot of population. And when you build a city with the intent of having a lot of people in it, and then a lot of people leave, it causes all types of issues around services, around infrastructure investment, around the budgets. And so there's a lot of similarities really between a Gary and a Newark. They both are on the water. They both are next to very large metropolises, in the case of Gary, Chicago, and case of Newark, New York City. And they also have a pretty diverse population of people that live in those cities. But because of their proximity and because of their history, they also show a great deal of promise, opportunity for future investment, job opportunities, and a chance to really claim an opportunity that their counterparts next to them, like in New York or Chicago, can't, because most of the development that's going to take place in a lot of those cities has already been done. So there's a lot of similarities. There are some differences. Just being in that northeastern corridor for a city like Newark presents a different challenge in some areas than what we have here in Gary, but they're very similar in a lot of ways.
Okay, well, currently now with all your other responsibilities, you share as the chairman of the Redevelopment Commission. And what I want to know with that is, did that help give you a deeper insight of what we need here in this city?
Well, I work with the redevelopment department, but not as the chair, just to make sure I don't want to take a title that isn't due to me.
Yes, yeah, okay.
But in working with redevelopment, likewise with working with the Gary Sanitary District and the city, it helps to get a broad perspective of what's happening in different aspects of the city. Each of these entities have some really strong people that have been doing good work for a number of years, but they haven't always had the opportunity to talk with one another in the way that would probably help achieve some goals. And part of what my experience and what I hope to bring to the table is, by working with each entity, doing a better job of figuring out where we can cross-pollinate, where we can have ideas that come from one area help one of the other areas and vice versa.
Okay, let's drop our anchor down in the
All
main
right.
project that we brought you in to speak about, and that's the project of the Gary Chicago International Airport.
Yes.
When you think about the airport, what are the things that really just jump out at you when you think about the project itself and the things that we've done to this point? And also, I want to mention that Honorable Mayor Karen Freeman-Wilson brought you in, and you met her. You let me know off camera that you met her on a phone conversation.
I sure did. I sure
and
did.
That's been a blessing for our city as well as her administration.
Well, the mayor has become not only someone that I work for, but a good friend and confidant, and someone that I rely on for a lot of inspiration. I was blessed to have the opportunity to meet her through a mutual contact who put us in contact by phone, but that has blossomed into what started as just a sharing of information, and now it's been a sharing of vision and work, where she's got me out taking her vision for the city and for the airport and working with her and her team to execute, and it's been fantastic. The airport, when I think about the airport, I see two things right off the bat. Most of the times where you hear about people discussing large infrastructure projects like the airport, it's a vision, but it's actually not something that's already been built. We have an existing operational airport that is 25 minutes from the city of Chicago, the third largest city in the country. That is an asset that just cannot be replaced anywhere else in the world, really. The second thing I see is, between the airport all the way to Lake Michigan, there's all this developable space that in some cases hasn't been touched, or space that's been vacated and abandoned for a number of years. For most developers, that kind of space is a dream. To think that there is greenfield space that they can build on to suit their specific needs with an airport 25 minutes from downtown of the third largest city in the country is unheard of. Doesn't exist in LA. It doesn't exist in New York, the two other largest markets here. Arguably doesn't exist in Dallas or Houston, and depending on who you ask, they'll debate which is the fourth largest city in the metropolitan area, or Houston or Atlanta. So this is a very unique asset that this city has, and the mayor's vision is to make sure that we keep control of the asset, but use the asset in a way that allows us to grow jobs here first and foremost, because people need jobs so they can take care of themselves and their families, and to grow the, I'll call it the brand of Gary in a way that really suits and does right by the history of the city.
Okay, Mr. Kemp, when you think about the mayor's vision, which we all work to bring that to fruition, what would you say in your promoting efforts, what are the three most things that you mention when promoting the Gary Chicago Airport and promoting the city of Gary? What do you mention to investors?
The most important aspects to investors, and this is something that we say to everybody, I think, is first and foremost, you have to suspend your disbelief. There are a lot of people who've been conditioned to believe that some of the changes that we discuss and that the mayor has set out as her vision won't be done, can't be done. They've been tried before and they failed, and we're going to be right in line with everyone else and not being able to achieve these grandiose plans that we've got. But it does take a moment for you to sit back and believe, just believe, and you're a man of faith, so I think you understand this. Just believe for a moment that this is possible. And I describe that to people because this is what's had to happen everywhere else, in all the other cities that are in similar situations, and for that matter, some major cities. Secondly, I describe to them the asset that I just talked about that can't be replicated. But thirdly, I speak to them in a language that they really understand, and that's money. My background is in finance, having also worked on Wall Street and been in private equity. And I explain to many of these folks that, listen, the opportunity to gain the kind of rate of return that generally can't be found by simply doing development projects in other cities is unparalleled in this area. And that's because you've got an existing asset that's supported by the city and the state, and you've got all this developable land all around it where you can combine the two with a vision that you have with someone that's a developer with means to come in here and make something happen in a relatively short period of time. So suspend your disbelief, look at this unparalleled asset, and see a vision of how you can actually take the combination of our location and what we've already invested to make money for you. And if you make money as a private person who comes in here, the city's going to do well, we're going to employ people, the state's going to generate money, it's going to do well for the region. It's a win-win all around for everybody.
Here recently has been articles about the Peotone Project, and I mention all the time that they have a dream. We actually have an asset.
That's exactly right.
And there's a difference. We have infrastructure. They have cornfields.
Yeah, it's a great quote, and I concur. And I would just say the effort that it takes to go from a cornfield to an actual airport is tremendous. And you can't set aside the fact that this airport's been in existence for decades. And there may be ways that we could have used the airport better in the past, but we still sit with an existing asset and are making improvements on that asset all the time. Capital improvements that you as an authority member has had the chance to oversee, and a major improvement right now in terms of extending the runway that groups like Peotone and others around the country can only dream about.
So tell us what is the goals for the ad hoc committee, which I'm also a part of.
Yes.
As far as you're concerned, from your perspective, what are the goals and how we're moving forward to meet those goals?
The ad hoc committee was started, as you know, in March of 2013. And since then, we set out a plan, a very aggressive plan, to go from first figuring out what, if we should do a P3, a public-private partnership, and if so, what should that public-private partnership look like? Make that recommendation to the authority, which we were able to do in May of this year. And then with that set aside and determine that, yes, a public-private partnership makes sense, and it should look like one where the city and the authority maintain control. We're not selling the airport, we're not privatizing the airport, but we're bringing experienced management in to help us grow the airport, and we're looking to combine those efforts with real capital that can invest in developing the surrounding areas, and people who have real skill set and being able to do development, both construction and management of businesses. After we came to that conclusion and was approved by the authority, we've taken the next step, which is expressions of interest, where we had what we called an REIQ, request for expressions of interest and qualifications. That was completed in the month of June. We got 8 great proposals back, both local proposals, local and regional proposals, national companies who responded, and international companies who responded to the interest. And that really validated the fact that all those elements that we described to the public really are there in terms of the quality of the asset, the fact that people can suspend their disbelief to believe that there's an opportunity to ultimately make some money. We're now at the stage where we've put out the RFP, the request for proposal, and we're now getting actual proposals from people who will be engaged in the further development of the airport and the surrounding region. Our hope is to have those requests come back to us by the end of this month of August, and to be in a position by early September to make a recommendation to the authority of those responders who should be considered for an agreement. And if all goes well and we get approval from the authority, the ad hoc committee will continue to work with the authority and directly with those respondents to make sure that we get a contract and an agreement, with the hope of, before the holidays, being able to announce people that we'll work with, and by the time we get to spring of 2014, break ground and start building some things.
I sat in on those interviews, Bo, and I was really kind of pleasantly surprised at the financial backing each group brought, and also the vision that they had for an airport that many of them had never known before that process took place. So how do you feel about that?
You know, I'm not surprised, and I'm not surprised in part because I went through the same experience in Newark, New Jersey, where people didn't think we could build, in this case, a stadium and get it done on time and get it done on budget, because the history hadn't proven that to be the case. But I think that when you can set aside the baggage of whatever's happened in the past and just present to people a very logical business picture of the opportunity, people will come to the table that you might not think otherwise would come. But the other element that's been important, and I think what's helped to attract a lot of people that you might not have thought would come to the table, is the speed at which we've worked. Right. We've made a real effort to work not at government speed, but at speed of business. And by doing that, it changes the decision process for a business of whether they can afford to be involved. Many companies are interested in doing work here in Gary and many other areas, but if the government can't work at a speed that's fast enough, you know, time is money for these companies, as it is for everybody. And sometimes the process of government doesn't allow for you to work quickly. We've been able to create, with the backing of the Airport Authority, this ad hoc committee that's allowed for us to work at a faster pace than we might have otherwise been able to. That speed is what's helping to suspend the disbelief of companies that we're going to really get to the end, have a P3 that makes some sense, and provide an opportunity for development and ultimately jobs here in Gary.
Okay, we talked about the speed that the process moves, and sometimes that's slowed down by government. You let us know earlier that you work with the state, and you also had some doings with the RDA. So tell us how you feel about those relationships, and what things that you find, or anything that you found was a surprise to you, or did you find some things to be more pleasant than what you thought they would be?
Well, I think whenever you have a mayor that is in a Democratic area like Northwest Indiana and is a Democrat, with a new governor who is a Republican in a predominantly, if not majority, Republican legislature, you're always concerned that when it comes time to ask for support from the state, that they may not be as eager to provide the support simply because they have other constituents to service that have been on their team, so to speak. I think the good news is that both Mayor Karen Freeman-Wilson and Governor Pence have decided that there's only one team, and that team is the state of Indiana. And they've been able to find a way to work together that's been very, very positive. And so I think the state has been as supportive as you could expect them to be in our process. And that will speak volumes to both the governor and the mayor's personalities and their willingness to set aside politics to put the people of Gary and the state of Indiana first. But it will also send a signal to businesses that we are prepared to put those politics aside, to move at the speed of business, to allow them to come in and ultimately grow the economy here.
Also with Chicago, with the compact, I know you had some dealings with the compact. I sit on that board also.
Yes, sir.
What did you find out about Chicago that you didn't know?
You know, I think Chicago is not that different in many ways than some of the other people we described, and having had a history where they've seen opportunity that has gone unfulfilled. The mayor has developed a relationship with the mayor, Emanuel of Chicago, that I think has been positive, and a lot of his staff, who also are eager to see the opportunity of the airport come to fruition. They, as you know, are in the process of a more typical privatization of Midway Airport,
Right.
which is very different than what we're doing here in Gary. We're not selling our asset, whereas they are looking to sell their asset. But we are all part of the same compact, as you mentioned, which
Yeah.
is a triumvirate. It's O'Hare, Midway, and Gary airports together. And this system is important because the way that airports work is by system. They need reliever opportunities for aircraft that are coming in either because of inclement weather or because of traffic. And Gary has always been intended to be that reliever airport and functionally is there, but hasn't practically been the place that could relieve some of that traffic over time. I think we're now demonstrating to the city of Chicago, and for that matter, the compact, that we really are stepping up to the plate and are in a position where they can think more globally about Gary Chicago International Airport as part of this compact and team.
Also, there's a former mayor in Chicago, Mayor Daley,
Yes.
through the University of Chicago, reached out to Gary, and that seems to be a really good working unit that works good along with the city of Gary. And speak on that. What do you feel?
Mayor Daley has been as good a friend to Mayor Karen Freeman-Wilson and to the city of Gary that you could expect any politician to be. He has really committed himself both to provide great advice to Mayor Karen Freeman-Wilson, but also to make sure that he can leverage resources to help us learn a little bit more about what we can do to better the city. So the project that we have with the University of Chicago, which is a partnership, we've created an organization that both can raise money on behalf of identifying ways to solve problems here in Gary, but as important, leverage the students that are attending not just the public policy school there at the University of Chicago, but all of their graduate institutions. So every quarter, 4 times a year, we have a new group of students who come in, and part of their class is in fact to evaluate and help identify ways to solve problems here in Gary. And with that knowledge, the hope is to be able to bundle that into best practices and apply it to other cities around the Midwest and around the country, and for that matter, of the world. And Mayor Daley attends those meetings and those presentations religiously, and has really been a good friend and a person that the mayor could lean on for solid advice.
Also, we have urban farming.
Yes.
Urban farming has quite a few gardens that's popping up around the city, and then you have some knowledge about that also. Never being a farmer,
Yes.
So tell us how you feel about these the urban farming, and what do you have on a personal level?
So
kind of working on that
you've
area?
touched my passion, which is farming. For the last 10 years, I've been raising a lot of my own food. I've actually begun raising fish at my house. So I have a tank, a 300-gallon tank with tilapia in it that I raise, I grow. I feed them, harvest them, and eat them with my family in an aquaponics tank. So the water recirculates. So I use the water to grow the fish, and then their wastewater I use to grow my plants, and vice versa, and they go back and forth. I was fortunate enough to take a commercial urban agricultural class with a gentleman by the name of Will Allen, who is really the godfather of urban agriculture, who lives in Milwaukee, and to take his course. And so with some of the people in that course and myself, we've decided to do a couple of projects here in Gary, and we're going to partner with Brothers Keepers, not-for-profit here that works with a lot of homeless men to build some mini farms in the middle of Gary that we can use to both employ people, but also to raise crops that we can sell to restaurants. And there are many other people who are already here in Gary who've been developing, as you mentioned, community gardens and other plots. We hope to work with as many of those people as possible and take a lot of the abandoned land that's here in Gary and turn it into farms. Not just because it's a way to feed people, but it's a way to hopefully employ some people. It's a way to encourage people to have healthy eating habits without having to tell them what to do. And ultimately, it's a way of beautifying the city, taking some of that abandoned space that right now obviously is a good place to grow because there's lots of things growing there, but to intentionally grow food that can be used to feed the folks here.
Okay, I've been getting the signal. It's time to wrap up, but in your closing remarks, I want you to share with us, how do you see the Gary Chicago International Airport in 10 years if we continue to move in the direction that we're moving in now?
Well, I think there are three things that are going to happen in the next 10 years that will be important. And 10 years is a good time frame because it typically takes 6 to 10 years in actually to execute a development project. I think in the next 10 years, what you will see in Gary is the airport itself, with additional management support, will continue to grow and will probably have a mixture of different types of services. So it won't just be charter planes, and it won't just be commercial flights, and it won't just be cargo, but it'll probably be a mixture of those three. But it'll be a lot more than what you see today. And that actually can happen in a 10 years time frame. It can't happen in 2, but it can happen in 10. What you're also going to see is a lot of development that's going to happen right around the airport itself. I think this concept of airport city or aerotropolis that some have presented to us makes a great deal of sense, because you need to be able to have rental cars and some space for people to be able to be housed if they're going to be flying in and out of the space, whether it's commercial flights or if it's business flights. I think the other thing you're going to see, and this is going to be the biggest driver in the 10 years, you're going to see a lot of development that happens in about the 3,000 acres from the lake all the way to the airport, up to Klein Avenue, down to Clark. And that work is going to be centered around probably 4 different industries: logistics, transportation, some waste to energy related opportunities, and possibly even defense. And in that area, you're going to see companies, hopefully as soon as 2014, beginning to expand existing businesses, other businesses that are going to move from Michigan and Illinois into Indiana to take advantage of that opportunity, and even some companies that are going to be coming here from overseas to establish their U.S. presence in Gary, Indiana, as their beachhead for what they do in the U.S.
Well, we thank you once again, Mr. Kemp, for coming and sharing with us.
Thank you for having me.
You've been an excellent interview, and we pray that you will continue to keep us on your schedule. We'll be calling you from time to time.
Anytime you want
we
me,
might
Pastor,
lean
I'll
on
be
your
here.
expertise.
Absolutely.
Thank you once again for watching the Gary Chicago Airport Show. I've been your host, Pastor Marion Johnson. Our very special guest here today has been Mr. Bo Kemp, taking time out of his busy schedule to come and share with us. We want to thank you once again. Continue to watch and pray for the Gary Chicago International Airport.